The sheriff is the one man every person living outside the law fears. Massively built, skilled in battle, and coldly efficient. If the sheriff stumbles upon an outlaw raid, he absolutely will not stop until he has hunted down and killed every one of the criminals. Aside from his combat training and his great size, the sheriff has one advantage other lawmen and bounty hunters don't have. And it's a secret no one else has yet discovered. Roger of Doncaster had been a young knight who fought well in the Crusades, earning the respect of his peers, who marveled at his strength and detached fighting style. He rarely seemed to lose his temper or become flustered, even in the most desperate of battles. He killed huge numbers of the enemy without glorying in his skill or showing any remorse for those whose lives he took. When the army returned home, though, Roger was shocked to find he was accused of skimming taxes. Of course, it was his bailiff who had been stealing the money, but Roger had been sentenced in his absence to 5 years in one of the state's infamous quarries. The knight knew he would not survive such a punishment. No one did, for the conditions in those labor camps were horrific. So, using his great size and unrivaled aptitude for killing, he dispatched the soldiers sent to his estate to arrest him and escaped into the wilderness. Soon enough, Roger realized surviving in the forest required a very different set of skills than those he was blessed with. Life until then had been fairly comfortable for Roger of Doncaster. Now, alone in the greenwood, the young knight found himself utterly lost and eventually close to starving. And then Hood's men discovered him. When they found out he was an enemy of the state, they took him into their gang, feeding him, and, more importantly, teaching him how to feed himself, using only what the forest offered. In return, Roger taught them new skills with the longsword, although no one ever bested him, for he was too strong. The one known as Hood was at that time becoming too old to continue as the leader of the Outlaws. Although he was a relative newcomer to their ranks, Roger had proven himself a great tactician and was offered the chance to succeed him and become the next Hood. Although he never truly felt like one of them, he accepted the title without hesitation. Roger always looked for ways to make his lot more comfortable, and positions of power were generally the best way to do that. Life as Hood was certainly better than being worked to death in a state quarry. But when the winter came, things were not so easy. The rest of the group didn't seem to mind the winter as much as he did, since most of them had struggled for their whole lives to fill their bellies and keep warm when it snowed. But Roger hated it. He did his duty and fought as ferociously as ever when the state soldiers came into the forest hunting them, or when the outlaws went on a raid. He did not feel any guilt when he hacked down one of the guards in the keeps they raided, for he was simply doing what any mercenary did to survive. The other members of Hood's gang saw themselves on one side, the state on the other. But Roger cared little for such ideas. He simply wanted to survive and live as comfortably as possible. So when the winter storms again hit their camp in the woods, the young knight wished more than ever that he could return to his previous existence as a nobleman of the city. One morning, he found the endless chatter of his companions more irritating than usual, so he wandered off to check the snares that had been set. As he knelt next to a waterfall, he sensed someone watching him and instinctively pulled his sword from its scabbard, drawing himself up to his full imposing height. A knight, almost as tall as he was, stood not 10 paces away, watching him. The man wore good quality armor and a helmet with a visor that covered his whole face. Roger knew immediately that this was yet another bounty hunter, come to kill the fabled Hood and claim the reward for his head. For a long time, the two warriors traded blows in silence, evenly matched in size and skill, but when his opponent tripped on a hidden route, Roger thrust the tip of his Templar longsword between a gap in the man's mail, and the bounty hunter collapsed on the grass with a groan of agony. When he regained his breath, Roger placed the tip of his sword on the fallen knight's throat and gazed down at him. "Who are you?" he asked. "I have no name," the man replied in a low voice. "I renounced everything when God charged me with hunting down enemies of the state." "Fool," Roger spat in disgust. "Remove your helmet. I would see your face before I kill you." The man shook his head. I vowed never to remove it unless I am alone with God, and I never have these past 4 years. Even before the council, Roger asked, and the knight nodded. Roger cared little for religion, but he knew that this was the opportunity of a lifetime, a true gift from God, and he decided to seize it with both hands. Placing his full weight on the Templar longsword, he severed the knight's windpipe and watched dispassionately as blood bubbled from his dying foe's mouth and the life drained from him. Quickly, Roger stripped the corpse and dressed himself in the dead knight's armor, finally placing the helmet on his own head, obscuring his face. Then he beheaded his foe and tossed the head into the churning waterfall, hoping the swollen waters would quickly strip the flesh away, leaving it unrecognizable. And then, Roger of Doncaster dressed his dead opponent's body in his own discarded woodland clothing, threw the corpse over his shoulder, and walked out of the forest towards the city, renouncing the name of Hood forever. The council were astonished to see the enigmatic knight back in the city. Many bounty hunters had tried to kill Hood, but all had disappeared, never to be heard from again. Hood is no more, Roger said, careful to keep his voice low, his accent neutral. He pointed to the headless corpse where he dropped it on the stone floor. The Grandmaster was so impressed that he made the mysterious bounty hunter an offer. There were still dozens of outlaws in the Greenwood, and a man of such talent might bring them to justice. If he performed well, he would be promoted to a most prestigious position, sheriff. The prospect of regaining power and authority was too good an opportunity to pass up. He could return to his previous noble way of life. He had never seen the outlaws as friends anyway. Many of them were rapists or thieves or murderers who deserved to be arrested. Why shouldn't he be the agent of their doom, especially now that Hood was no more? Without a leader, their gang would be easy prey for one like him, who knew their ways. And so it was for a few months. He went about his new work, killing many of his former comrades, and so earning the coveted position of sheriff. He continued to wear the helmet with a full-face visor for fear anyone discovered his true identity, giving rise to rumors that the new sheriff was hideously disfigured. Once he had hunted down and killed the rest of the fugitives, he planned to remove his helmet, though, and reveal his true identity, for the state would surely be so grateful to him that they would overlook his previous transgressions. The common people who had previously idolized Hood refused to believe the news of his death, much to the council's annoyance. Hoping to crush their hope completely, Roger would ride out into the wild wood with his soldiers under his command, using his knowledge of the forest and the ways of the surviving outlaws to hunt his prey mercilessly. One such day had been going well. Spring had come at last, and it was fine and sunny, although the heat made his face sweat uncomfortably within the stifling helmet. Still, it had been a productive hunt so far, with 2 criminals captured and another speared in the back while trying to escape their patrol. Suddenly, an arrow hammered into the soldier on Roger's left flank, and time seemed to slow as a young man with enormous shoulders stepped into the track before them. He carried a longbow, crafted from yew and the antlers of a stag, a dark hood obscuring his face. From the trees all around them, a volley of arrows erupted, smashing state soldiers to the ground, dead and dying, horses and men screaming in pain and fear. The sheriff turned his horse and kicked his heels into its flanks. Desperately, he urged it back, out of the forest at a gallop, heedless of any obstacles or pitfalls, caring nothing for the fate of the soldiers and his command, left to the outlaw's mercy. As his mount carried him back to the safety of the city walls, the sheriff feared his life was not going to be quite as comfortable anymore. Hood had returned to the forest.